Hi everybody, thank you for coming again. Tonight's shir is sponsored for a Refua Shelema for Chaim Shimon ben Elka. May he have a Refua Shelema b'toch Shachol Yisrael, and an Aliyat Neshamot for Sybil bas Avrohom Chaim, Tzadik, a great name, Tzadik ben Dov Be'er, and Moshe ben David Avrohom. And again, may the Divrei Torah be le'iloi nishmatam. And finally, a mazel tov to Rabbi and Rebbetzin Poston, YIBONEH simcha on the birth of a baby boy, to your son and daughter-in-law. And Refua Shelema to Shelley Bat Karen and the entire Poston and Argi families. Again, Baruch Hashem, it's kind of our simcha as well. We finished last week the very, very sad and tragic story of Korach. And right after Korach, the Torah gives us a bunch of mitzvos that are very, very interesting. The mitzvah of Parah Aduma, the red heifer, which is said to be the most mysterious, enigmatic mitzvah in the Torah. And now the truth of the matter is, it's very, very interesting that although the details of the commandment appear after Korach, it is 100% textually demonstrable that there must already have been such a ritual, because in Parshas Baloscha, after the Mishkan was put up, the Leviim were said to be purified by sprinkling upon them the waters of purification. Meaning, there was already a Parah Aduma, so this is actually an example of the Torah not... That's exactly right. The Torah is not in chronological order. The mitzvah of Parah Aduma was not given after Korach, was given before Korach. And in fact, according to Chazal, it was even given before the Torah was given. It was given in the oasis of Marah. Now, you don't have a proof from that. The only proof you do have is that it was given before Korach, but Chazal actually predate it. But be it as it may, it's introduced with a certain formula, Zos Chukas HaTorah. Now, the word chok means mitzvot that we don't. People say, they translate that don't have a reason. That's rather not true. Hashem certainly has reasons for everything, but we don't know. We don't understand what the reason is. But the Meforshim, and of course Parah Aduma is the ritual to become purified by mixing the ashes of a red heifer, mixing it with water. When you sprinkle it over a person that is ritually impure on day 3 of his Tumah and on day 7 of his Tumah, then he goes to the Mikvah on day 7. Then at night, after 7 days, he is now ritually pure. He can enter the Beis HaMikdash. Now remember that Parah Aduma, there are many types of Tumah in the Torah. Seminal emission, a woman that's a nida, a woman after childbirth, a person touches a dead animal, a metzora. Many types of Tumah. Parah Aduma is not relevant for most types of Tumah. Parah Aduma is relevant for only one type of Tumah, and that is the tumah that is contracted by touching a dead body, or by moving a dead body, or by being under the same roof as a dead body. Tumas meis. And for other tumos, usually going to the mikveh is enough. Tumas meis, we need the Parah Aduma sprinkling, and we need mikveh. Now I think, as I indicated a few weeks ago, this is, just to review it very quickly, this is the key halachic reason why there's an issue of going on the Har HaBayit, because the Har HaBayit is the Temple Mount, and at least part of the Har HaBayit, not the whole Har HaBayit, but part of the Har HaBayit has the holiness of the Beit HaMikdash, and any area that has the holiness of the Beit HaMikdash, a Tamei Meis is not allowed to go. It's a Chi of Kares. And since anyone that's ever been in a cemetery any time of their life remains in a perpetual state of Tumah until we have the Parah Aduma, all of us are Tamei. So I cannot go in any area that is designated with the holiness of the Mikdash. Now, in truth, it is I don't want to get in trouble for this, there are very definitely areas of the Temple Mount that do not have the holiness of the Beis HaMikdash, and therefore, in truth, the outer perimeter of the Temple Mount would be permitted. And those religious Jews who go to those areas, they're willing to take that position. The reason why most Gedolei Yisrael just say the Temple Mount is off limits is simply because we're not entirely sure where the different areas begin. And since it's like walking in a minefield, right? Let's imagine you're told that certain parts of this field, there are live mines that are going to go off. But if you stay 3 inches away from this line, you're going to be okay. You know, most of us would not feel that secure because of the margin of error. Well, kares, death in the hands of heaven, and possibly losing Olam Haba, is a lot worse than a minefield. So most Gedolei Yisrael say, just stay away from it. Those who are a little more confident in their identification of areas will say, go here and don't go here. If you're not religious, you go anywhere that the Arabs allow you to go. Again, unfortunately, the Arabs seem to have more influence in this area than HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But putting that aside, in principle, there are shtachim that you are allowed to go to, but the Gedolei Israel basically say not to do it. And the reason is, until we have Parah Aduma, we have no way of purifying ourselves from Tumat Met, right? So Parah Aduma is the mysterious ritual that is used as a purification mechanism for Tumat Met. Now, I'm going to start off with a very technical problem. That is, Parah Aduma is introduced with the phrase, this is the law of the Torah. Question is, it's not the law of the Torah, it's the law of the Parah. For example, when the Torah introduces Korban Pesach, it also calls it a chok. It is Zos Chukat HaPesach. This is the law of the Pesach. So by analogy, it ought to say, this is the law of the Parah. Why does it say this is the law of the Torah? As if there's something in Parah Aduma that pertains to the whole Torah. How is that so? So, I want to give you 2 answers, basically. Answer number 1 is that the Avrohom Chaim quotes a medrash that Shlomo HaMelech says in Koheles, Shlomo HaMelech, the wisest of all people, Amarti echkema, I thought I would acquire wisdom, V'hi rechoka mimeni, but I saw that wisdom was very far from me. It was distant. So the Medrash explains, he was going over every mitzvah in the Torah and he understood the reasons for it. When he got to Parah Aduma, he was stymied, he was stuck. But says, the Mefarshim says, the Avrohom Chaim, by the fact that he reached Parah Aduma and couldn't figure out a reason, that taught him that even the mitzvos that he thought he understood have deeper meanings that are unfathomable by human understanding. So it's not simply, oh, I understand everything, but I don't get this one. This one shows me what I thought I understood was like the tip of the iceberg. Whatever it was, there are going to be infinite depths of meaning. That's why it's called Chukas HaTorah, because the whole Torah is a chok. Chok, something we don't really understand. Because it comes from God. God is infinite. There are infinite layers of meaning, right? That's why, the old arguments people make, it's an old argument. I remember it as a child already. Well, the Torah prohibits pork because without refrigeration in particular, there's trichinosis and parasites. But now that we have modern cooking and modern refrigeration, there's no reason why not to eat pork. Or the Torah prohibits making a fire on Shabbos because fire used to be so difficult to make, it was laborious. But today, what's fire? Strike a match, turn on a stove, turn on a light. And people make all sorts of arguments that the Torah has a particular reason for something, and then you start saying, well, that reason doesn't apply, therefore. The short answer is, I'm not denying that some of those reasons may be valid. Maybe health was a concern in the laws of kashrut. But every single mitzvah of Hashem is infinite. And there are going to be layers and layers and layers that we will never understand. And that's why Parah Aduma was put there as an example of something that's clearly an enigma, so you'll understand that the whole Torah is a chok. Zot chukas ha-Torah. This is what the Avrohom Chaim says. The second explanation, I'll actually give you three answers. I'll give you answer number two, is this. That we know that mishpatim is the term that is used for those laws that make sense to us. Don't kill, don't steal, don't commit adultery. Those are things we understand. Chok is used for those laws that are enigmas. So the truth of the matter is, the true test of an Eved Hashem is not whether he keeps the laws that make sense. If I keep laws that make sense to me, am I doing it because I'm serving God? Or am I doing it because it happens to be God's will works with whatever I believe at this particular time? So in a sense, the litmus test of one's commitment to Torah is, do you do those things that don't make sense? Because doing those things that make sense is not necessarily a commitment to Hashem. Therefore, Zos Chukas HaTorah, from the Chok, we see your attitude towards the Torah. You are a servant of God. You're not simply following what makes sense to you, but you go above the Seichel. Now, a third answer is based on a passage of the Gra, the Vilna Gaon. He doesn't say it as an answer to this question, but I'm going to borrow it as an answer. And this is a very, very amazing passage in his commentary on Mishlei. And it's so amazing that when I used to say it at an Ar Sameach gathering, people from Lakewood said it's impossible to be true. So I don't say it anymore there because they say it's impossible, even though the Vilna Gaon says it. Okay, I didn't make it up. The Vilna Gaon, by the way, we do know the Vilna Gaon was not a slouch when it came to Torah learning. He obviously considered Torah learning to be very important. He learned around 22 hours a day, sleeping in 4 half-hour increments over a 24-hour period. So he was not a person who devalued the learning of Torah. But listen to this. Everyone knows the famous teaching that Torah is compared to water. And there are a gazillion reasons why Torah is compared to water. Water is necessary for life. Torah is necessary for life. Water refreshes. Torah refreshes. Water cleans and purifies. Torah cleans and purifies. Water goes from high ground to low ground. The Torah leaves the arrogance and goes to the humble. Right? All of these are beautiful, basic ideas why Torah is compared to water. But listen to what the Gra says. Why Torah is compared to water. It is the nature of water that whatever you pour it on is going to grow. Meaning, water is indifferent if it's positive growth or negative growth. If I pour water over soil that has seeds, if the seeds are wheat or beautiful flowers, I'll get wheat or beautiful flowers. If the seeds are poison ivy or any other type of weed, I'm going to get weeds. Water has what is called a koach hatzmicha, a power to generate growth, whether it's for the good or whether it's for the bad. So says the Vilna Gaon, if a person has in their personality good midos, they are kind, they are compassionate, they are generous, they are humble, the learning of Torah will make him more kind, more generous, more compassionate, more humble. So far, not controversial. Agreed. But listen to this. If chas v'shalom, a person is arrogant, selfish, and cruel, the learning of Torah may make him worse. It is water. And that's why the Vilna Gaon emphasized, before Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, the importance of combining your Torah study with work on your character traits. Because if you leave the weeds inside, the learning of Torah is going to make it even worse. Quite amazing, quite amazing. So Torah has this amazing paradox. It can purify you, or it might drag you down if you learn with arrogance and gaiva. So, in Para Aduma, we actually find a similar paradox. Right? This is the famous paradox of the Para Aduma. Those who are impure become purified by being sprinkled. But those who are pure, those who are handling the ashes and the water, they become ritually impure. So the same thing that can bring purity can also bring impurity. And that is a characteristic of the Torah itself, because Torah is compared to water. So Zos Chukas HaTorah means the same paradox of Para Aduma we find in the Torah itself. And again, this is the famous phrase, Mitaher es hatmeim. It purifies those who are tamei. Umitaher es, Mitaher es hatmeim. Umitamei es hatahorim. Those who are pure become tamei. By the way, I remember years and years and years ago, in Ner Yisrael, my Rosh Hashiva, Rav Ruderman, Zichrono Livracha. So one of the perennial issues that black hat yeshivas face in the United States is whether they'll allow their Talmidim to be advisors in an organization like NCSY. It's a perennial problem. It's been an issue for many, many years. It's still an issue. NCSY, as many of you might know, they've started in Israel, but it's not as big in Israel as it is in the United States, is an organization of the OU, the Orthodox Union, that works with public school kids, elementary and high school, middle school and high school kids. And many of them come from totally unreligious backgrounds. It's a co-educational program. And NCSY is really one of the wonders of the world in terms of changing these kids' lives, making them religious, but with enthusiasm, with simcha. Many of them go on to yeshivos and seminaries. They get married. They establish Jewish homes. And it is such a loving, beautiful atmosphere, NCSY. But it is co-ed. And at least initially, some of the girls in particular may not be dressed tznius. And then some of the advisors as well are, college students, boy college students, girl college students, etc. So in the black hat yeshiva world, there's always kind of an issue where the Rosh Yeshiva don't like their students participating in these type of co-educational events with Kol Isha and lack of tznius and various other things as well. Now that creates a very big problem, because that means that you're taking out the most religious elements and you're telling them not to participate. So what you might be getting are people who are less religiously committed to be the advisors and the like. So this is an issue that Rosh Yeshiva grapple with. Some allow it, some don't allow it. Some say you can only go if you're married already. You go with your wife, you don't go as a single person. Okay, different issues. I was involved with the NCSY for a number of years, but it was only after I was married. Now, here's the thing. The classic line that my Rosh Yeshiva said about NCSY, it's really a very witty line. He says, he considered NCSY to be the Para Aduma. He says, it purifies those who are impure. It takes people who are not religious, and it elevates them. But God forbid, it may sometimes have the negative effect of those who are already religious. It might lower their standards. So that's going to be a paradox. The paradox is how do you balance that? Okay. But again, that's maybe a talk for another time. All I can say is I have absolute great admiration for what NCSY has done. For now, it's been probably 60 years that it's been around. In fact, the founder, Rabbi Pinchas Stolper, just was nifter last year. So his sechar in Olam Haba must be just literally very, very unbelievable. Okay. So now, though, I want to talk about this paradox, because Para Aduma is described as the chok par excellence, the enigma. And the Meforshim say the enigma is in the paradox, meaning it's not simply, oh, a red cow is a funny ritual. I mean, there's a lot of things in Judaism that are funny, like why can't you mix wool and linen, whatever it would be. So it's not just the fact that the details are a little strange. It's the contradiction that is difficult. How can the same thing that is a force for purification be a force for a lack of purification, to make your tummy? By the way, let me just digress for a moment. People sometimes raise the question that if the ashes purify the tummy, but make the people who handle it themselves tummy, how do you ever get the Jewish people to be totally pure? Let's imagine that we get the Aduma back. Okay, and a Aduma is made, and now we have a Beis HaMikdash. We all have to be pure because we're going to bring korbanos. Everybody has to be pure. Now, how is that going to happen? If a Kohen sprinkles the ashes on you, you're pure, but now the Kohen is impure. So somebody has to sprinkle the ashes on him, so he's pure, and so somebody's left holding the bag. Meaning to say, if you always have a circumstance that whoever handles the ashes becomes tameh, then it's going to be impossible by definition to ever achieve a state of purity. There'll always be the last person, whoever the last person is. The answer is that is a false assumption. And the reason that's a false assumption is that the tuma of handling ashes is not tumat mes. It's a separate tuma. And all you need for that is mikvah, meaning you don't need. If I'm tameh because I handle the ashes of paraduma, I don't need to be sprinkled by the ashes of paraduma. I just need to go to the mikvah. So the last guy jumps into the mikvah and he'll be okay. Right? So it's very, very simple. The problem only is this, because some people get the impression that every tuma of paraduma needs paraduma to purify. That is not a true assumption.
Is that mikvah a 7 day or overnight?
No, it's only 1 day. It's only 1 day. Tumat met is 7 days. The tuma of Efer paraduma is a 1 day tuma. So at night he's going to be totally tar. By the way, so we have this paradox, okay? So I just want to share quickly a beautiful thought from the Sfas Emes. Even though you would seem, if even Shlomo HaMelech didn't understand the paradox, how dare we explain the paradox, right? We got to get it wrong. I mean, we can't be thinking of something he didn't think of. But even so, when it comes to Torah, we're supposed to go as far as we can go, even if we know that greater people than us obviously didn't totally agree. And the Sfas Emes and Rav Tzadok actually try to offer an explanation for this paradox. Let's focus generally on a very important Torah concept, the concept of impurity. Some people and things are tameh. Some people and things are tahor. And that's a biggie. When a person is tameh, they can't go into the Beis HaMikdash, they can't eat korbanos, they can't bring korbanos. If they're a Kohen, they cannot eat truma. Tuma is primarily connected to restrictions having to do with the Beis HaMikdash or holy things. Now, tuma is a huge variety of things. There's tuma of dead bodies, there's tuma of dead animals, there's tuma of leprosy, there's tuma of nida, there's tuma of seminal emission. All sorts of tumas. There's tuma of childbirth. But is there a common denominator of what makes things tuma? So Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch says that the common denominator of tuma is some type of direct contact with death. When we are in connection with death, there is a state called tuma that descends upon us. And Rav Hirsch made the argument, every form of tuma is connected to death. Now, you may question that. Well, wait a second here. Certain forms of tuma are obviously connected to death. I touch or I move or I'm under a roof with a dead body. Okay, that's simple. Dead animals, which is a one-day tumah. By the way, this is dead animals that weren't shechted. If you eat a hamburger, you don't become tamei, unless it's a treif hamburger. Now, there's the tumah of dead animals are animals that were not shechted. Okay, but all right. So there's tumah of dead humans. There's a tumah of dead animal. Even a seminal emission is a form of death because the seed that went out did not produce a child. Nida is connected with death because it is the shedding of a uterine lining that could have sustained a potential pregnancy. What about childbirth? A woman after childbirth is tamei. Now, she's tamei if there's a stillbirth. Okay, so that's connected with death, but she's even tamei if it's a live birth. How is that a connection with death? So Rav Hirsch makes the argument, which you may or may not buy, that even childbirth is a form of death because it is the death of the life that was within her becoming externalized. There was life within her that is now outside, and that's a form of death. So Rav Hirsch says all tumah, leprosy is also a form of death. It's a disintegration of the flesh. So all tumah comes from connection to death. Now, why is that so? Why does connection to death engender tumah? So Rav Hirsch argues that originally man's ideal state was immortality. God created Adam in his image to live forever. Death came into the world because of the sin of the Eitz Hadat. And that sin required expulsion from the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden was the idyllic existence with God. And the introduction of sin created two consequences, which are really connected. One is death, and the other is expulsion from Eden. Although you might actually say that's the same thing. So Rav Hirsch says, every time we are connected to our mortality, we are reconnecting, so to speak, we are re-experiencing the chait of the Eitz Hadas. And we have to be expelled from the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden on earth is the Beis HaMikdash. So Tumah is primarily a state that is connected to the Beis HaMikdash. So Tamei equals not having access to the temple, equals expulsion from the Garden of Eden, because contact with death reenacts the sin of the Eitz Hadas. Right, this is a thought of Rav Hirsch, which is why Tumah does not mean you're dirty, it does not mean you're unclean, it does not mean you're unfit. A Tamei person, I mean all of us are Tamei, can do all of the mitzvot. You daven, you keep Shabbos. Yeah, I'm Tamei, but I learned Torah. But Tumah is a state that necessitates expulsion from Gan Eden, which in Olam Hazeh, Gan Eden is the Makom HaMikdash. That is that encounter with God, with the intimacy and immediacy of Gan Eden, right? This is Rav Hirsch's idea of Tumah as a reenactment of the Chet of Eitz Hadas. Now, this is Rav Hirsch. Now I'm going to move to Rav Tzadok. Rav Tzadok makes the point that what brought Adam and Chava to the sin of the Eitz Hadas, right? The Nachash enticed Chava, who then enticed her husband. The Nachash's argument, which is hard for us to parse exactly, is if you eat from this fruit, you will be like God with a true knowledge of good and evil. V'hayisem kelekim, yodei tov v'ra. And God doesn't want you to have that knowledge. And that's why he's telling you not to eat it. Which means the Nachash is marketing the fruit, which, by the way, was not an apple. The Gemara has many opinions what it was. According to some, it was grain. It may have been wheat, or esrog, or fig, or grape. The one thing that's not mentioned in the Gemara as a possibility is apples. In fact, I'm not even sure if apples are native to the Middle East, but whatever it is. So this fruit is marketed as a God pill. Take this fruit, you will be God. So Rav Tzadok says, the downfall of Adam was gaiva, was arrogance. The idea that man wants to be God. And in a sense, people discuss a lot, I don't want to get in trouble, is the story of the Eitz Hadas a metaphor, or is it an actual historical event? And people will often debate history versus metaphor. I would suggest to you that this is a false binary thinking. It's not either or, history or metaphor. We believe these things happened. They did happen, but they are also metaphoric because they have certain meanings beyond the particulars of an event. So it's not history or metaphor. Same thing by the Exodus. You hear this, did it really happen, or is it a symbol of the striving of freedom, etc.? The answer is it's both. The events of the Torah are archetypes. They're prototypes for spiritual powers that come in and repeat over and over and over again. So yeah, are there metaphorical meanings to the sin of the Eitz Hadas? 100%. That's not a negation of the historical event. Which means the downfall of man is their attempt to be God. And that brought death into the world. Now, the thing is, in many, many ways, we are godlike. We are, after all, the Torah says, we are created in the image of God, Tselem Elokim. This, by the way, even applies to non-Jews. This is not only Jews. Tselem Elokim. Now, what does the image of God mean? It doesn't mean a physical image. God does not have a physical image. But it means we have attributes of divinity within us. Whether it's free will, intelligence, creativity, the ability to make or create or destroy, all sorts of things. And Rav Soloveitchik writes in The Lonely Man of Faith, the classic essay, that even things like scientific discovery, and we talked about this last week, working on cancer research is part of man in the image of God, to take nature and don't simply say, I'm subordinate to whatever is out there, but I go out and I create. So we are godlike. But it's precisely our godlike natures. And we talked about this last week, and we revisited here, that can lead us astray. And death comes into the world when man convinces himself he can be God. Because that's what the Nachash says. Eat and you will be God. Whatever that even meant. So, death came into the world not so much as a punishment, but as a reminder that as great and as godly as man can become, mortality is the ultimate reminder that there's an unbridgeable chasm, an unbridgeable gap between the Creator and the creation. So this is why death came into the world, because of kavod, arrogance, hubris, gaiva. And this continues to have an importance in modern times. Scientists are trying to create life with cloning or whatever it might be. And we have to be aware of our limits, and we have to understand that although Judaism is certainly pro-scientific research, but we're not God. And we have to be aware that we're not God. So because of this, Rav Tzadik says the following. If death comes into the world because of arrogance, hubris, gaiva, the purification from death, the liberation from death, the restoration to the Garden of Eden, which we get when we leave the Tumah, must come through rituals of humility and submission. That's how we get liberated from death. That's how we return to the Garden of Eden, which is access to the base HaMikdash. So, let's take Tumat Met, which is obviously the strongest tumah connected to death, because that's how you became Tameh. So the two rituals that purify you are the sprinkling of the ashes of the Parah Aduma and going to the Mikvah. Both of them are rituals of humility. Now, without getting into all of the details, why a red, why a cow, all of that stuff. But the basic idea to be sprinkled with ashes. Ashes is a symbol of humility, of submission, of submissiveness. Avrohom Avinu says to God, Anochi, Afor va'efer. I am dirt, I am ashes. So, if death comes into the world because of arrogance and gaiva, I become liberated from death when I'm sprinkled with ashes. I connect to ashes. It's like the old, there's an old Greek myth, but the emesis is a medrash from Chazal too, but unfortunately people are more familiar with it from the Greek context, of the phoenix bird. The phoenix bird was a bird that when you burnt it into ashes, it rose from the ashes. And people often use the phoenix as a symbol of the Jewish people coming back after Holocaust and everything else. We rise from the ashes. The truth of the matter is, there's a medrash. The medrash talks about the netz bird, a certain type of bird that's burnt and rises from the ashes. But Rav Tzadik has a little bit of a different twist. Most people understand the metaphor that we suffer and we suffer and we suffer, but we come back. So the ashes refers to kind of what the goyim do to us. But in Hasidus, there's a different understanding. It's not referring to the goyim beating me or whatever it is. It means by destroying my ego, by obliterating my egotism, I get reborn into a higher state of holiness and connection. The ashes is making myself ashes, not what somebody else did to me. So it's a different metaphor. It's not we rise from the ashes of the Holocaust, although Baruch Hashem, that's true also. But this is the notion. I find myself by losing myself. When I'm filled with egotism, with gaiva, with the sense that I'm God, then I remain tameh. I'm expelled from the Gan Eden. And that's what contact with death revisits every time. It revisits the chet of the Eitz Hadas, which was V'yisem kelokim yodei tov v'ra. So, the purifying power of Parah Aduma comes from the humility that liberates you from death and reunites you with the Garden of Eden, with Hashem. Now, in truth, Mikvah also represents, Mikvah itself, which is the second purification ritual, also represents humility. One of the themes of Mikvah is it's a return to the womb. Right? That baby in the mother's womb is kind of immersed in water. It's breathing through the umbilical cord. In fact, I say, people who adopt young babies who are not Jewish, so the baby has to go to the mikveh. Meaning, you don't throw the baby in the mikveh, but the father will go and hold the baby and dip the baby in the mikveh. So parents are sometimes very worried about taking a baby and dipping him underwater. So you need to know, this might be relevant to some of you at some point in your lives, that babies love it. and actually it's easier to take them to the mikvah before they're 6 months old, because they have a swimming reflex that when they hit the water, and now it has to be face first, it has to be their nose hits the water, they hold their breath, and they even, it's very cute, they even do the dog paddle. They do a little swimming in the water, and they like it a lot. After 6 months, it's not dangerous even after 6 months, but they lose the reflex, so they might swallow a little water, so they might be a little uncomfortable. And if a baby cries, I know this from experience, if a baby cries when you take them out of the water, it's not because the water was uncomfortable, it's because of the change of temperature. The mikveh water is warm, and the change from warm to cold is a little uncomfortable for them. But they love it. It's a very familiar environment. So some make the argument that the mikveh is returning to the womb, and you get reborn as a baby, free of pretense, of artifice, right? You no longer have the egotism that destroyed you, right? So both mikveh and Parah Aduma are connected to humility. Again, I didn't hear you.
Go in this tameh and you come out tahor.
Yep.
It's the same concept.
That's exactly right. That's correct.
The next person who goes in doesn't get any of the tumah that you brought in.
Right, when he goes into the mikveh, yeah, because he connects to that humility. So now, and this again will be a little bit revisiting the theme we talked about last week, but it pops up more than once, and that is, again, the Sfas Emes is trying to explain the paradox. How can the thing that purifies you make you tameh? He says, because there is good ashes and bad ashes. Ashes, humility, submission to God, obliteration of ego, wonderful, good, holy, ennobling, restorative. But at the same time, when the ashes take away your self-esteem, it takes away your evaluation of yourself, it becomes destructive. This is kind of a paradox. Humility is the greatest virtue that one could have, but when it's taken in the wrong direction, it becomes destructive. It becomes a Yetzer Hara. It robs me of my confidence. It robs me of a sense that I matter. If a person truly thinks they're worthless, then why should Hashem care about their mitzvahs? Why should Hashem care about their Torah? You'll never be the person you're able to be. That's why Rabbeinu Pershischa said the famous statement, you got to have two ideas in your pockets. Pocket number one, Anochi Afar V'Efer, I'm dirt. Pocket number two, Bishvili Nivra Ha'olam, because of me, the whole world was created. One man, one woman justifies the whole universe. That's not arrogant, because if I say Bishvili Nivra Ha'olam, for you too, Bishvilcha, Bishvilech Nivra Ha'olam. It's not arrogant, but it makes me realize I matter, I make a difference. And I gotta feel I make a difference, because if I don't make a difference, then what's the difference what I do with my life? The answer is, it makes a difference. I'm important, you're important, God needs. Without getting into Manis Friedman debates here. Okay. So, this is the explanation of the paradox. The ashes purify by letting us transcend our egotism. But when it's taken in the wrong direction, it can make you impure, because it robs you of your sense of worth. So the paradox is the paradox of humility in and of itself. There is the humility, in fact, this is interesting. There's the humility of empowerment, and there's the humility of despondency. The humility of empowerment actually says, I'm nothing. But when I connect to God as the ultimate power source, He will give me the resources to make a difference. That's good humility. That's purifying humility. The humility that I don't matter and what I do makes no difference is the humility of despondency, of passivity. That's treif. That's mitameh. So we have the paradox. The same attitude, when taken in the right way, purifies, and the same attitude can destroy. Right? So again, on one hand, Shlomo HaMelech said it was a chok. So obviously, this is not a complete explanation. But I think the insight is a very beautiful insight. Once again, death comes into the world because of arrogance. We are liberated, and therefore we're expelled from the Garden of Eden. We are liberated from death by humility. But humility itself has the dangers, when taken in the wrong direction, of making us tamei. And that's why the person is tamei. He has to go to the mikvah, kind of go back to the womb, and relearn, kind of, or dislearn that negative attribute that brought him down. And it's interesting that at the Chazon Ish's Levaya, the Chazon Ish died, I think it was 1953. The Chazon Ish died, and Panovich Yeshiva, of course, is in Bnei Brak. And the Chazon Ish lived and was buried in Bnei Brak. So the mashgiach of the Panovich Yeshiva at the time was the famous Rabbi Leo Dessler. Rabbi Dessler had an amazing career of activity in England, and then he came to Eretz Yisrael, and he was the mashgiach of the Panovich Yeshiva. Of course, as great men often do, he didn't give anything up. He was still handling everything in England when he was in Eretz Yisrael too, so he was kind of just adding things constantly. But at the Levaya of the Chazon Ish, which was a great tragedy, because the Chazon Ish was so involved in everything going on in Eretz Yisrael. So there was a boy that was sobbing, a boy that was crying at the Levaya of the Chazon Ish. So Rav Dessler went over to the boy and he said, "Why are you crying over the Rav, the Gaon, the great man, and the Tzadik who's buried in the ground? Why are you crying over the Rav, Gaon, and the Tzadik who's buried in the ground?" And then he pointed to the boy. "You should cry over the Rav, the Gaon, and the Tzadik that's buried in you. Because the Rav, the Gaon, and the Tzadik who's buried in the ground became the Rav and the Gaon and the Tzadik that he was destined to become. But what about the greatness in you that you don't even realize?" He says, that's something to cry about. He says, that's something to cry about. That within us, there's the Rav, Gaon, and the Tzadik that we don't even realize, that we don't even try to, trigger, try to develop. And this is where humility can actually give you a false turn, right? Take you in the wrong road. And that's the meaning of the paradox. But the final point I want to share with you is a beautiful thought from the Apter Rav. The Apter Rav, Avram Yeshua Heschel of Apatow, a town in Poland, famous Hasidic Rebbe of the 19th century. The book on Chumash that he wrote is called Ohev Yisrael, because his theme in virtually every Parsha is to talk about Avas Yisrael, right? So he's known as the Ohev Yisrael, the Apter Rav. So the Apter Rav quotes a medrash that says the following: if you want to understand the secret of Para Aduma, you must contemplate Avat Yisrael. Avat Yisrael is the secret of Para Aduma. Very enigmatic. I mean, Para Aduma is a ritual, but how does Para Aduma show us Avat Yisrael? So this is a medrash. So the Apter Rav explains it the following way. We know that Para Aduma has a paradox, that the person that it's sprinkled on is pure, but the people handling the ashes, they're impure for a day. Now we look at that as a paradox. The Apter Rav says maybe it's not a paradox. Maybe it's a cause and effect. Pure, because again, for a Kohen to become Tameh, even for one day, is an inconvenience for a Kohen. He can't eat Truma. I mean, his wife made him a nice lunch of Truma sandwich, whatever it is. He can't eat it, even if it's one day. So it's not just Beis HaMikdash. He can't go to work, right? He'll dock his pay, whatever it will be. And his wife made a good lunch of truma. He can't eat it. It's an inconvenience. Ella what? But to help another Jew become pure, he's willing to inconvenience himself. That brings purity into the world. Purity comes into the world. In other words, the reason why it purifies the impure is because it makes the pure impure. Because when a Jew is willing to inconvenience himself for another Jew, that brings purity into the world. By the way, I have to digress for a moment, because although it's not essential to this vort, but I am going to get comments if I don't say this, so I'm going to have to say it. Because people think I don't know this, and they always correct me, and I do know this. The rule that people who handle please, anyone who wants to contact me, please listen. The rule that says that people who handle the ashes of the Parah Aduma get tameh does not apply to the Kohen who actually sprinkles. The Kohen who sprinkles the ashes and spring water on the person does not become tameh. Even though the Torah's lashon is the one who sprinkles is tameh, Chazal darshan, that just means the people who carry the water and the ashes that are going to be sprinkled, not the actual sprinkler. So although I said a number of times, anyone handling the ashes becomes tameh, it does not apply to the actual sprinkler. Okay, so I know this. Okay. However, nevertheless, that's also a chok. Yeah, that's another chok within a chok. But nevertheless, the people who prepare it in anticipation of the sprinkling do become tameh. So the vort of the Apter Rav is still a good vort, that I put myself out for a fellow Jew. That brings purity into the world. And this is a famous little Hasidic story. They say that a father was teaching his son how to read, and in a printed Chumash, Hashem's name, the Yud Kei Vav Kei, is often written as two Yuds. And we read it, Ado, right? We read it as Hashem's name. So when the boy first saw the two Yuds, he was reading the Nekudot under the two Yuds, and the father said, no, you read it Hashem, or Ado, etc. So then, at the end of a pasuk, you have like a colon, right? You have two, it looks like a Yud on top of a Yud. It's just the end of a sentence. So the kid read it as Hashem's name. So the father said, no. When you see it like that, it's just like a period. You don't read it, it's just a period. So he asked his father, how come when they're side by side, it's Hashem's name, and when one is on top of the other, it's the end, it's a period? So the father said a beautiful answer. Yud is Yid, a Jew. He says, when one Yud stands next to another Yud, when two Yidden stand together with equality, with respect, with love, with friendship, that's where Hashem is. But when one Jew stands on top of another Jew, when one Yud is on top of another Yud, looking down, thinking they're superior, that's the end of the sentence. The Torah goes no further. The Torah stops. The Shekhinah stops. The Shekhinah does not come in that type of relationship. So it's a beautiful way of remembering it. A Yid next to a Yid is God, the presence of God. A Yid on top of a Yid, Sof Pasuk. The Torah goes no further into that relationship. And that's why the Apter Rav said that Parah Aduma itself is connected to the idea of Avas Yisrael. I put myself out to help another person. So, Be'ez Hashem, we should be zocheh. Now we're entering, now we're in the month of Tammuz. Of course, tomorrow night is also the yard site of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Gimel Tammuz. And, obviously Chabad will be doing all sorts of huge things, but I think all of us have to look at the Lubavitcher Rebbe as an example of a person who was not only a leader in every conceivable way, but a person whose Avas Yisrael was virtually limitless, without gavul, in which every single Jew in the world was his personal concern, his personal achrayas. And of course, none of us could hope to even imitate the tiniest of fraction. But we should look to this midah and try to incorporate it in our lives to whatever degree that we can, and that will continue to give the Rebbe a tremendous nachas ruach, but more importantly, it gives HaKadosh Baruch Hu a nachas ruach when the Jewish people love each other and care about each other. Just like parents often say, it's interesting, when parents get older and they're approaching death, one of the things they talk about a lot, it's very interesting, is they want their children to kind of get along with each other. It's something that parents really think about a lot. That, talk to your brother, call your sister. A parent gets tremendous nachas when the children, especially as adults, still connect to each other. Huh? Yeah, Shevet Achim Gam Yachad, right. So, if that's true for human parents, it's very true for HaKadosh Baruch Hu as well. He gets tremendous nachas when his children are connected to each other. So we should all endeavor to give that nachas to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So thank you. Have a good week.
It's